Megan Holloway was glowing, expecting her first child, and married to the man of her dreams, until Tyler Holloway discovered there was no baby, no pregnancy, and no truth left in the woman he thought he knew. What began as a picture-perfect love story twisted into a web of lies, manipulation, and obsession so deep it ended in tragedy and death. Now the chilling truth is finally being unraveled. Megan Lawson was the kind of woman people envied without knowing why. She had an effortless charm, the kind that drew people in during neighborhood barbecues and PTA meetings. She wasn't the loudest, nor the flashiest, but she had that curated life, the kind that looked like a magazine cover. Her husband Tyler was the tall, clean-cut type with a steady job as a systems analyst and a passion for woodworking. He had built most of the furniture in their home. Together, they seemed like the American dream. Their two-story house sat neatly on a quiet cul-de-sac in Westerville, Ohio, where porch lights twinkled at night and neighbors waved as they mowed their lawns. Their mailbox always had fresh flowers in it. Christmas cards from the Lawsons were the first to arrive every December, featuring carefully staged photos of them wrapped in scarves, holding mugs of cocoa, always smiling. But behind the walls of that perfectly decorated home, the silence had started to spread like a shadow. For years Megan had been hiding a secret, not from the world, but from the one person who trusted her the most. She and Tyler had been trying for a baby almost since the day they were married. At first it was hopeful and exciting, buying baby name books, tracking ovulation cycles, imagining nursery themes. But month after month passed, and nothing happened. Megan saw doctors, underwent tests, took medications. Each failed attempt chipped away at her hope, and eventually she stopped trying, but she never told Tyler. Tyler, ever the optimist, kept believing it would happen. He'd kiss her forehead and say, "When it's meant to be, it'll be." He didn't know she'd stopped charting her cycle. He didn't know she cried in the shower almost every morning. What he did know was that he loved her, and he wanted to build a family with her. As their 5th anniversary approached, Megan felt the pressure mount. Tyler had started making comments about seeing a fertility specialist, or possibly exploring IVF. He was serious now, and Megan, paralyzed by fear and shame, couldn't bring herself to admit the truth. She had failed, and she believed he would leave if he knew. The idea came suddenly, half fantasy, half panic. What if she just told him she was pregnant? A white lie to buy some time, to make him happy, to make herself feel normal again. Maybe she'd figure out what to do next. Maybe she could fake a miscarriage later, and he'd grieve with her and move on. One morning she ordered a positive pregnancy test from a questionable website she found in an online forum. The packaging was discreet. The lines were faint, but there. She set it on the bathroom sink where he'd find it. She left the bathroom door half open, and she waited. Tyler's reaction was exactly what she'd hoped for: overwhelming joy. He lifted her off the ground, kissed her forehead, and whispered how he'd always known this day would come. Megan smiled, cried, and let herself believe, just for a moment, that this might work, that the lie might save them. That afternoon Tyler took her to dinner at her favorite Italian restaurant. They talked about names. He wanted something classic. She pretended to be unsure. He started designing a new crib in his mind. She nodded, staring at her plate, heart thudding so loudly she barely heard him speak. Back home, he wrapped his arms around her while they sat on the couch. Megan's eyes wandered to the fireplace mantel where the wedding photo stood. She didn't feel proud. She felt the slow creep of something darker, dread maybe, or guilt. But Tyler looked so happy, and that happiness was like a drug she didn't want to give up. She told herself she'd find a way out. Maybe she'd fake a doctor's visit. Maybe she'd say the baby stopped growing. There was time to plan, time to figure it out. For now she just had to keep the illusion alive. But even in that moment, as Tyler kissed her goodnight and drifted to sleep with his hand resting gently on her stomach, Megan knew the truth. Once a lie begins, it never stays small. It grows and grows until it consumes everything in its path. The morning after Megan's announcement, the mood in the Lawson household had shifted. There was a buzz of excitement in the air that hadn't been there for years. Tyler couldn't stop smiling. He made her breakfast in bed, ran out to buy prenatal vitamins, and even ordered a stack of pregnancy books before noon. Megan watched him flutter around with nervous energy, and something twisted in her chest. Not joy, Not exactly. More like a cold realization that this wasn't just a lie anymore. It was a performance, and she had just taken center stage. Tyler began asking questions about doctor appointments, how far along she was, if she had called her OB/GYN yet. Megan gave vague answers, saying she thought she was about 5 weeks in, and that she'd call her doctor after the weekend. He nodded, trusting, never doubting, but each question felt like a new weight added to a house of cards already trembling. That evening, Megan sat at her laptop, researching everything she could. What did morning sickness feel like? When did the first ultrasound typically happen? How much weight did women gain in the first trimester? She jotted notes in a notebook, rehearsing symptoms she didn't have, and planning out a timeline she hoped wouldn't be questioned. Every detail had to be perfect. If she messed up even one thing, Tyler would note. He had a sharp memory and an analytical mind, but he had a blind spot, his love for her, and Megan knew it. She started setting alarms to fake nausea, shuffling quickly to the bathroom in the mornings, and making exaggerated retching sounds. When she emerged, pale and shaken, Tyler would be waiting with a damp cloth and a look of helpless sympathy. She played the role with quiet determination. This was her new job now, to convince everyone, especially Tyler, that a baby was coming. Weeks passed. Tyler marked each one with tiny celebrations, flowers, back rubs, even a surprise dinner where he gave her a world's best mom mug. Megan smiled, laughed, cried in all the right moments, but behind closed doors, she couldn't sleep. The lie was growing faster than she'd imagined. She had expected to feel more in control. Instead, she was falling deeper into a story that had no end. Tyler began asking about appointments again. Megan told him she'd already gone to one and that everything was normal. He was disappointed she hadn't told him in time to come along, but she soothed him with promises that he'd be there for the next one. She even printed out a fake ultrasound photo she bought online and handed it to him with trembling fingers. It looked just real enough. A blurry black and white swirl with a date and a fake name scribbled on the edge. Tyler stared at it for what felt like minutes. Then, without a word, he tucked it into his wallet like it was sacred. But the more Megan lied, the more real it had to become. Tyler wanted to paint the nursery. He bought a white crib and started sanding it down in the garage on weekends. Megan stood in the doorway one afternoon, watching him hum to himself while smoothing the wood, and a sense of dread crept up her spine. How far would she have to take this? How long before it all collapsed? She started avoiding his eyes. She said she was too tired to go out, that her back hurt, that she needed to rest. In truth, she was scared. Every move Tyler made toward this imaginary child only deepened the pit in her stomach. There was no baby. There never had been. But now there was a crib, and vitamins, and ultrasound photos taped to the fridge. One night, Tyler mentioned setting up a baby registry. He said it might be fun, that his sister wanted to throw them a shower. Megan nodded slowly, her mind spinning. She hadn't planned for any of this. She had thought the lie would be small, something to soothe the tension until she could ease out of it. But now it had grown teeth. It was alive in Tyler's eyes, in his voice, in the way he said "our baby." Megan knew she was running out of options. The clock was ticking. Eventually Tyler would want to come with her to a real appointment. Eventually, he'd start asking the kinds of questions she couldn't fake answers to. She needed a new plan, something bigger, something dark. And in that moment, standing in their living room surrounded by gifts for a child that didn't exist, she realized something chilling. The only way to keep the lie alive was to find a way to make it real. The Lawson home transformed almost overnight into a shrine for a child who didn't exist. Megan found herself surrounded by baby-themed decorations, gifts from excited relatives, and the weight of expectations pressing down harder each day. Every corner of the house reminded her of the secret she was desperately trying to maintain. The nursery had become the centerpiece of their lives. Tyler spent his evenings painting the walls a soft mint green, his hands steady, his heart full. He talked about the future with wide-eyed excitement, often placing his hand on Megan's stomach, and whispering dreams he had for their unborn child. Megan played along. She downloaded a pregnancy app, and showed Tyler fake updates. The baby is the size of a plum this week, and even complained about phantom aches and cravings. At night she stuffed a foam pad under her clothes, shaping it more each week, to match the look of a growing belly. She ordered maternity jeans 2 sizes larger than she needed, then patted them carefully so they'd fit just right. Her deception became a full-time performance. She practiced how to walk like someone carrying extra weight. She took deep breaths and rubbed her lower back when Tyler looked. She feigned fatigue and propped her feet up on the couch, declining outings and visits with the excuse of needing rest. Every move was rehearsed, deliberate, designed to hold the illusion in place. Tyler remained deeply involved, attending every parenting webinar he could find and even signing them up for a childbirth class. Megan panicked. She told him her doctor recommended waiting until the 3rd trimester. He didn't question it, just nodded and kissed her forehead. His trust, once a comfort, now felt like a blade against her throat. Family and friends began reaching out more often. Tyler's sister dropped off baby books and knitted booties. Megan's coworkers threw a surprise baby lunch, decorating the break room with pink and blue streamers. Megan smiled for pictures, accepted every compliment, and laughed at every joke. But beneath her cheerful mask, her mind was racing. How much longer could she keep up this act? How many people would she hurt when the lie unraveled? She started keeping detailed notes, fake appointment dates, fake doctor names, lists of made-up symptoms, just in case someone asked. She even used a second phone number to confirm things with Tyler if he insisted on calling the clinic. But each day brought new challenges. Tyler wanted to install a car seat. He talked about baby-proofing the kitchen. He started leaving parenting books open on the coffee table, with dog-eared pages and highlighted notes. Megan knew she was losing control. What started as a simple lie had spiraled into a complex web, tightening around her like a snare. Every prop, every fake photo, every calculated move added weight to the secret. She stopped sleeping. She'd lie awake, listening to Tyler's soft breathing beside her, and wonder what would happen when the truth finally came out. At first, she considered faking a miscarriage. She rehearsed the story in her mind, how she'd found blood one morning, how the doctor had given her the terrible news. But something always stopped her. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was the realization that the sympathy wouldn't last forever. Eventually people would expect her to move on, and Tyler, who had built his life around becoming a father, might never recover. She told herself she was buying time. Just a few more weeks, she whispered silently each morning, but even she no longer believed it. There was no exit, only delay. Then came the baby shower. Megan had tried to avoid it, claiming she didn't want to jinx anything, but Tyler's sister insisted. It was held at their home, a bright spring afternoon filled with laughter and gifts. Diaper cakes, strollers, bibs, and tiny onesies filled their living room. Megan felt like she was standing on a stage, the crowd cheering for a role she never auditioned for. As the guests left, and the house grew quiet, Megan looked around at the piles of presents. Everything around her screamed joy and celebration, but in her chest, something was cracking. The lie had grown too large. It had taken on a life of its own, and she knew without a doubt that she couldn't fake her way out of this forever. But still she tried, because if the truth surfaced, it wouldn't just destroy her, it would destroy everything. Tyler had always trusted Megan. She was calm, organized, and never gave him a reason to doubt her. But trust, no matter how deep, has limits. And with each passing week, something began to feel off. At first, it was just little things. Megan would flinch when he touched her stomach, claiming she was sensitive. The unraveling began quietly, just a tremor at first, not a quake. Megan noticed it during a routine trip to the corner pharmacy. The woman behind the counter, who had always greeted her with a warm smile, avoided eye contact. Her voice was clipped, her tone colder than usual. Megan brushed it off as nothing, just a bad day. But then it happened again at the grocery store. A neighbor who once stopped to chat crossed the aisle to avoid her. A friend who had dropped off a casserole last week didn't return her calls. Word was spreading, and Megan could feel it like a heat beneath her skin. Tyler still hadn't contacted her, not even to offer condolences. She checked his social media accounts obsessively, but they were quiet, eerily so. She didn't know where he was staying. She didn't know who he had spoken to, and that made him dangerous. Tyler wasn't the kind of man to stir drama, but he was the kind to seek quiet justice. Megan feared what he might be doing in the shadows, who he might be talking to, what questions he might be asking. The first real sign of trouble came when she received a formal letter in the mail from a local law office. Tyler had retained a lawyer. He wanted separation officially. Megan sat at the kitchen table, gripping the letter with trembling hands. It wasn't just heartbreak anymore. It was exposure. If the separation process moved forward, details would come out, financial records, medical statements, a full picture of the last 6 months, and Megan's lies would be laid bare. She couldn't let that happen. Her mind began working overtime. She needed to regain control of the narrative. One final play, something that would either bring Tyler back or destroy everything before the truth could reach the surface. That night, Megan made a chilling decision. If she couldn't hold Tyler with love, she would bind him with tragedy. She called his lawyer the next morning and left a voicemail. Her voice shaking, her words carefully chosen. She said she had just received a new diagnosis, postpartum psychosis. She was under psychiatric evaluation. She begged them to delay the separation to give her time to recover. It wasn't entirely false. She had spoken to a counselor weeks ago, in a single frantic session, where she shared just enough to seem distressed, but not enough to admit the truth. Then she doubled down. She sent Tyler an email. The subject line was simple: "Please read before it's too late." In it she poured out another layer of lies. She said she had attempted suicide, that the grief had become unbearable, that she had stood on the edge of a bridge and only backed down when she imagined the life they were supposed to have. She attached a blurred photo of the doll, Elijah, wrapped in a blanket, lit by candlelight. She said it was taken during their private memorial. She didn't hear from him for 2 days. On the 3rd day, Tyler returned, but not in the way she expected. There was no emotional reunion, no flowers, no apology. Instead, he arrived with a police escort. Megan answered the door, wearing a gray robe and tired eyes. She played the part perfectly, fragile, grieving, confused. But Tyler wasn't looking at her with pity. He was looking at her like she was a stranger. The officer calmly asked to speak with her. They had received a report of mental instability and concerns about potential harm to herself and others. They needed to take her in for evaluation. Megan didn't fight it. She nodded and followed them quietly to the car, her mind racing the entire time. This wasn't a total loss, she told herself. She could use this. If people believed she was mentally unwell, it would explain everything. The lies, the faked pregnancy, even the fabricated death of a child. She could wrap it all in a cloak of illness, and people might still forgive her, or at least leave her alone. But what Megan didn't know was that Tyler had already uncovered the truth. All of it. He had spoken to the clinic, tracked her online purchases, found the company that sold her the doll, and worse, he wasn't the only one watching anymore. There were others, and someone was about to come forward with evidence. The psychiatric hold lasted 72 hours. Megan remained calm, answering every question with carefully chosen words. She played the role of a fragile woman broken by grief, her voice quiet, her eyes downcast. The doctors noted her emotional distress, but she was composed enough to avoid being committed long-term. After 3 days, she was released with a handful of prescriptions, a pamphlet on postpartum disorders, and instructions to attend weekly therapy. She returned home to a different world. The house felt foreign now, like someone else had lived there and left behind remnants of a collapsed reality. The sympathy cards were still on the mantel, but their words now felt hollow, almost mocking. Megan stared at the baby swing in the corner, once a symbol of hope, now a shrine to a fantasy gone too far. Outside, neighbors watched her from behind curtains. Conversations stopped when she walked past. The air buzzed with unspoken questions. She told herself it would blow over. People would forget. They always did. But Megan didn't know that the fuse had already been lit. Tyler had remained silent. Not a single message since her release. That worried her more than anything. He wasn't avoiding her. He was preparing something. She could feel it. Her fears were confirmed 3 days later, when she received a visit. Not from Tyler, not from friends, from 2 plainclothes investigators. They were polite but firm. They asked if she had a moment to speak about inconsistencies reported in the recent death of her child. Megan's breath caught. She tried to stall, asking for a lawyer, but they weren't arresting her. Not yet. They only wanted answers. They had questions about medical records that didn't exist. About the hospital she claimed to have delivered at one that had no record of her ever being admitted. They mentioned a digital trail, online purchases, the synthetic doll, manipulated documents. They even had screenshots from forums where she had researched faking pregnancy. Megan's mouth went dry. She sat stiffly on the couch, heart pounding as she tried to remember every lie she had ever told. The web was too tangled now. There was no straight path out. Then came the final blow. One of the investigators revealed that Tyler had given them everything: the email, the fake memorial footage, the cremation paperwork with falsified signatures. He had waited, gathered the evidence silently, and handed it over not for revenge, but for protection. He claimed he feared Megan might hurt herself or someone else if the truth ever unraveled in the wrong way. And now the authorities were opening a full investigation. Not just into fraud, but into potential mental health deception, misuse of community resources, and possible criminal impersonation of medical professionals. Megan could face charges, serious ones. She didn't cry, she didn't scream. She sat there frozen, the room spinning around her. Everything she had done, every lie, every staged moment of grief, was now collapsing into a single point, a single truth. She had become the villain in her own story. After the investigators left, Megan stood in the nursery. The light filtered through the curtains in soft beams, highlighting the dust now settled on the crib. She touched the mobile hanging overhead, its once bright colors faded. There was nothing left to do, no more lies to build, no more stories to invent. She had faked a pregnancy, invented a child, staged a death, and tried to trap a man with a grief that never existed, all in the name of love that had long since turned into obsession. And the world finally saw her for what she was. The media picked up the story within a week. Wife fakes pregnancy and infant death in twisted bid to save marriage. The headlines read. Megan's face was everywhere, accompanied by words like manipulative, disturbed, and dangerous. Tyler never spoke publicly. He didn't need to. The truth was enough. Megan's name would be remembered, not for the life she created but for the one she invented and destroyed in the process. And the most chilling part, she never once apologized.